My name is Michael Slade. At least, that's the name I can use here. My real name isn't safe to share. And you'll understand why in a moment. For 14 years, I served inside the Pentagon. I worked on programs you will never hear about on the evening news. And what I'm about to tell you has haunted me every single night since. My official role was analyst. That's the word you'll see on paper. But in reality, I was part of something far different. A branch that didn't officially exist. We were assigned to what's called special access programs. Think of it as a locked room inside a locked room. Only a handful of people even knew we existed. Our mission was simple: to analyze incidents and documents that the government couldn't explain or didn't want explained. Sometimes that meant strange encounters in war zones. Sometimes it meant entire villages wiped from the map. And every time, our orders were the same: classify it, bury it, and move on. At first, I thought it was just politics. That maybe we were hiding failures, keeping things quiet to protect reputations. But the deeper I went, the more I realized this wasn't about mistakes. There were things, objects, events, even people that didn't fit into any framework we understood. Photographs that showed shapes in the sky one second, gone the next. Reports of soldiers describing the same dream, word for word after an operation. Witnesses vanishing within hours of giving testimony. And yet, every file had the same stamp: closed, do not pursue. As the years passed, I climbed higher. The higher you go, the fewer filters remain. Eventually, I was cleared for a room most of my colleagues had only heard rumors about. No windows, no phones, just a dozen terminals, locked cabinets, and thick folders marked with red tape. Top secret/majestic. That was the label. It was there I found my first real glimpse of the truth. Documents on experiments the Pentagon had conducted on its own soldiers. Attempts to control the mind, to alter perception, to weaponize fear itself. That was the moment I realized we weren't protecting the public. We were protecting something else entirely. I won't pretend I was a hero. I wasn't. I followed orders just like the rest. But when you go home every night and you can't tell your wife why you're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., when you can't explain why you wake up drenched in sweat from dreams that don't even feel like your own, silence becomes its own kind of prison. And that silence began to eat away at me. Because when you know your government is hiding truths that could rewrite history itself, you start to wonder how long you can keep your mouth shut. And so tonight, I'll break the silence. I'll tell you about the file that changed everything for me. A file stamped with the name that still makes my skin crawl. Its code name was Red Sun. And once you hear what was inside, you'll understand why I walked away from the Pentagon for good. The file was thinner than most, but something about it made my hands shake the first time I touched it. Across the top, in bold red letters, were 2 words: Red Sun. I opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, reports, and a single handwritten note. The kind of note you don't usually see in official Pentagon files. It simply said, "Do not stare at it for too long." According to the report, in the summer of 2010, a unit operating in eastern Afghanistan stumbled upon something inside a cave system. At first, they thought it was just another weapons cache, but what they found was different. Buried halfway into the rock was an object. Smooth, metallic, and completely out of place. Not a bomb, not a vehicle, not anything they had ever seen before. The soldiers described it as a black sphere, almost perfectly round, about the size of a man. When they tried to move it, their equipment failed. Radios went dead, compasses spun wildly, and one of the men collapsed after only touching its surface. The photos in the file were grainy, but even in those low-resolution images, I could tell it wasn't made by us, or by anyone we knew. The deeper I read, the more unreal it felt. The soldiers who discovered the object were ordered to secure the cave until a recovery team could arrive. That's when the real problems began. The object wasn't just heavy, it was impossible to move. Standard tools, hydraulic lifts, even explosives had no effect. The report stated that when they tried to cut into it with a plasma torch, the flame bent, as if space itself curved around the sphere. Metallurgical analysis was attempted on a fragment they claimed had chipped off. The results came back classified, but one phrase remained in the margins of the document: composition not of terrestrial origin. Even more disturbing were the effects it had on the men. Several reported violent headaches within minutes of entering the chamber. Electronics shorted out. Night vision goggles went completely black. One soldier described hearing a low hum, though no device recorded any sound. And then there were the photos, grainy, black and white shots taken inside the cave. The object appeared perfectly smooth, yet in every picture, its surface looked slightly different, as if it shifted when no one was looking. In one photo, it almost resembled an eye. In another, it was glowing faintly, like an ember about to ignite. The file included testimony from one lieutenant. He wrote, "When I touched it, I saw something. Not a vision, not a dream. It was as if my mind was pulled somewhere else. I saw a red horizon, and above it, a sun that wasn't our sun. It was too large, too close. It burned everything." 2 days later, that lieutenant collapsed during patrol. The medical report listed a cerebral hemorrhage. He was 28 years old, perfect health, no previous conditions. His death was the first, but it would not be the last. What unsettled me most wasn't the photographs or the failed attempts to move the object. It was the testimonies of the men who stayed near it for more than a few hours. They began to dream. At first, it sounded harmless enough. A few soldiers reported restless nights, strange images, nothing concrete. But then the reports became identical. Every man described the same vision, a barren landscape beneath a sky of burning red. In the distance, a sun loomed so close it filled half the horizon. They spoke of shadows moving across the ground, long stretched shapes of things that didn't match their bodies. One soldier said he saw his own reflection, but it wasn't him. The face was blurred, unfinished, as if it were still being created. What made it worse was how quickly the dreams spread. Men who hadn't even entered the cave began experiencing them after spending time with those who had. One private, barely 20 years old, begged to be discharged. He wrote in his journal, "Every night I wake up under that red sky. I can't escape it. Even when I close my eyes during the day, I see it waiting for me." The journal was included in the file. The handwriting grew shakier with each entry until, on the last page, there were only 3 words written over and over: "It's still watching." I stopped reading at that line for a moment, because I knew what it meant. These weren't just dreams. They were transmissions. Whatever that object was, it wasn't dead. It was communicating. And then, almost casually, one note in the report mentioned that I wasn't immune either. After reviewing the file for hours in that windowless room, I went home that night and slept for the first time in days. And I dreamed of the Red Sun too. The dreams were only the beginning. The file became darker with every page. Within a week of the discovery, 2 soldiers vanished from the camp entirely. No tracks, no sign of struggle, nothing. One moment they were assigned to guard duty. The next, they were gone. Their names were struck from the official roster as if they had never existed. Days later, a 3rd man was found, if you can call it that. His body was discovered near the entrance of the cave, slumped against the rocks. According to the report, his eyes had been burned out. Not removed. Burned. The coroner's notes stated the retinas were completely seared, as though he had stared into the sun for hours. What disturbed me most wasn't his death, but the final words recorded in his field journal. In jagged handwriting, he had written, "The sun is inside us now." After that incident, the cave was sealed. All further operations were ordered classified. Several pages of the file were missing, torn out before I ever laid eyes on them. But even with what remained, the message was clear. This wasn't just an object, it was a contagion. Not of the body, but of the mind. And it was spreading. The final portion of the file described the cleanup. Officially, the incident never happened. The missing soldiers were reassigned on paper to overseas deployments. Their families received letters claiming they had died in accidents thousands of miles away. Convenient lies, signed with forged signatures. Every trace of the cave was erased. A demolition crew collapsed the entrance with explosives, burying the site beneath tons of rock. Satellite images of the region were blurred, deliberately altered to hide the scars on the landscape. But the object, it wasn't destroyed. According to the last intact memo, it was moved, transported under heavy guard to a classified facility in Nevada. The name was redacted, but I didn't need it spelled out. Everyone inside the Pentagon knew what that meant. Area 51. There was one final note, scrawled in the margin of the report by a hand I didn't recognize. It read, "We can contain it, but we cannot silence it." That was when I understood the true purpose of this file. It wasn't just documentation, it was a warning. And now, I've passed that warning to you. What the official file didn't say was almost as important as what it contained. Hidden in the back, inside a thin envelope marked only with a date, I found a series of personal testimonies. Notes passed between officers who weren't supposed to speak about the incident. One letter was from a captain stationed near the cave. He wrote, "I can no longer tell when I'm awake. My men stare at the horizon even when the sun is down. Some whisper numbers, repeating them like prayers. I fear this is not containment, but infection." Another was from a medic. Her handwriting was shaky, ink blotting the page. She described how the soldiers' vital signs shifted at night, heart rates syncing together, as though responding to a single, unseen pulse. She wrote, "They breathe in unison, even when they sleep in different tents." But the most disturbing testimony came from an unnamed officer whose note was unsigned. It said only, "We are no longer studying the object. The object is studying us." These weren't part of the official record. They were hidden, slipped between pages like contraband. Someone wanted them preserved, even if it meant risking their career or their life. And reading them, I realized something the Pentagon refused to admit. The danger wasn't confined to that cave. It was spreading through paper, through memory, through anyone who came into contact with the file itself. Which meant, by the time I finished reading, it had already touched me too. At first, I told myself I was only affected because I had read too much. Hours spent staring at blacked-out documents, at shaky handwriting from men who'd lost their grip on reality. But soon, I realized it wasn't just in my head. The first symptom was the sleep. I couldn't keep a normal cycle. No matter what time I closed my eyes, I woke at exactly 3:17 a.m. every night. The same hour the medic had mentioned in her notes. Then came the sound. Not a voice, not at first, just a low hum, like the resonance of a machine buried deep underground. Some nights it faded in the background. Others it vibrated so strong I swore my teeth were shaking in my skull. And then the visions. I would step into my kitchen and, for just a second, the tiles under my feet turned to ash. The air shimmered with heat. And through my window I didn't see Washington anymore. I saw that endless red horizon. Once, I caught myself writing in a notebook, my hand moving without me realizing it. When I looked down, the page was filled with the same 3 words from the soldier's journal. It's still watching. That was when I stopped pretending this was just a story in a file, because I knew the truth. I hadn't just read about the contagion. I had become part of it. I wish I could tell you the story ended there, that sealing the cave and burying the reports was enough. But last month, I received a package at my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a folder, its cover stamped with a single word. Reopened. And taped to the inside was a photograph, recent, not decades old. It showed a desert landscape under a crimson sky, the same horizon from my dreams. Except this time, there were towers, black, jagged shapes reaching upward, like something was building itself. I shouldn't have opened it. I shouldn't even be telling you this. But once you've seen what I've seen, silence is impossible. And if you think this was the Pentagon's darkest secret, you're wrong. 'Cause the next file they tried to erase makes the red sun look like nothing more than a warning shot.